In 2015, my marketing agency, Single Grain, almost went out of business. I'm going to walk you through some of the exact steps, the mistakes that I made to take an 8-figure company to almost bankrupt, and within the span of a year, turn it around to grow the fastest that we've ever grown. I'm going to walk you through the major lessons. I'm going to walk you through all the mistakes at the end of the day so you can sidestep them. And these are all mistakes I hope to never, ever repeat, and I hope you never have to make. So stick it out to the end of the video. You're not going to want to miss this. In the very beginning of the company, the fall of Single Grain, we'll just start with that. I ended up taking over the company when I was in my mid-20s or so. And I thought I knew everything because I came from the world of tech. And I worked in software, and I actually wasn't even interested in coming into the company. But after 6 months being in the company, I was fortunate enough to be able to negotiate a deal to take over the entire company, to own 100% of the company. And I learned a lot from that experience. And the first thing I would tell you is that when I bought the company, it was already a declining business. And so what I mean by that is that the work that we're doing before was no longer working. So imagine if you have a declining business, you have headwinds going against you, right? So customers are maybe no longer interested in your product or services anymore because they're not as effective. So you have to fight on that front. You have to fight the daily kind of entropy of, or the atrophy of people management. There's all people problems all the time, right? And that's just part of business. And so what I would say is, one, there's a declining business model, and I wasn't really paying attention to it. So I would never wish on anybody, if you're ever planning on buying a business, you want to make sure that a business is moving in the right direction and it's continued to compound over time. Maybe in the last 3 years or so, hopefully it's growing, because you don't want to buy a job at the end of the day. And that's really effectively what I came into. And I just didn't know it at the time. The other thing I would say is, in terms of bad decisions, I would call this shiny knowledge syndrome. You can see a lot of books behind me over here. I love learning. I love teaching at the end of the day. And sometimes that can go a little overboard. And I actually read a book called Let My People Go Surfing by the Patagonia co-founder. So most of you would probably know Patagonia is a very successful clothing company. And I read in the book something that really stuck out to me. I really enjoyed his leadership style. I read a passage where he talked about letting his people go surfing during lunch. And that sounded really good to me. That sounded like the boss I wanted to be, because I felt like I wanted to give my people autonomy. I felt like if I'm someone that can figure things out and in my mid-20s, take over this company, it's like, what do I know, right? Who am I to tell people what to do at the end of the day? And so what happened was I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Let my people go surfing. So I stopped showing up to the office. And very quickly, people wouldn't show up to the office. And some people would even come in. When they did come in, they would be wearing pajamas and wearing slippers and be watching Family Guy on TV while eating chips. And other people would see that. And so, I read a lot of books around delegation, right? Going back to shiny knowledge syndrome, is delegate, let people get out of their way, let them do their thing. And I wasn't actually delegating at the end of the day. I was actually abdicating. Delegation is one thing. Delegation means that you're making sure that things are still getting done. I abdicated because I wasn't there to hold people accountable. And that's, a lot of people miss that. And I took things, I had a pair of rosy glasses on, and I'm not necessarily blaming the books, but a lot of things that I would read, a lot of things I would hear from people, I would be very quick to implement them. And some people call this the lightning bolt CEO. And so, early CEO, there's a lot of anxiety. How do I make sure that I'm doing a good job, right? I'm going to implement all these things. These things all sound good. But what happens is, every time you implement something, you're taking resources away from something. And what happens is it starts to create drag on the company. And so, in today's day and age, now that I'm a little older and wiser, I don't try to do that as much anymore, even though I do read a lot still, or I do learn a lot still. I do realize that trying to push too many initiatives at once can cause a lot of stress on people. And ultimately, the stress causes people to leave or not do as good work. If they're not doing good work, that's going to hurt the clients. The clients will churn, and that hurts the entire company because that puts downward pressure on the company. So, those are a couple of things. Shiny knowledge syndrome. I mean, there's I'll talk about in a little bit. I had this ingrained in my head about, I need to hire a CEO. I need to hire a CEO. I need to hire a CEO, because I've read about it everywhere. Everyone's hiring a CEO and getting out of their way, right? When you onboard a CEO, get out of their way, let them do their thing, right? You hire smart people to tell them what to do. And I'll have some stories to share around that in a little bit. But that's another thing that, from shiny knowledge syndrome, that kind of stuck with me. And I'm not saying that doesn't work. I'm not saying you shouldn't hire a CEO at the end of the day. I certainly think it's very warranted. It's just the way that in which I approached it led to the fall of Single Grain and the lack of focus, right? Doing too many changes at once. We shut down the San Francisco office and then we put an office down in Santa Monica, but that made all the San Francisco people remote. We changed our services from SEO. We changed it to content marketing because it seemed very adjacent. We hired someone that was really experienced with content marketing, and then that person turned out to be a disaster, right? But I'm not even going to blame that person because at the end of the day, what happens? As the founder of the company, or sorry, I shouldn't even say founder, as the CEO of the company or as the owner of the company, the buck starts and stops with you. And I didn't really understand that at the time. And even though I made some mishires, we can't blame the mishires. It was bad hiring on my part at the end of the day. So just understand that everything good that happens in the company is probably because of the people around you, but everything that's bad around you that happens is because of you. I don't care who you like. Sure, there can be other people involved, but ultimately you are the one that is responsible for that. So what ended up happening is, I took the company over in 2014. So I joined the company late 2013. And by 2015, we had dropped all the way down to one employee. And I remember someone resigning and them saying, and I still talk to this person today. They said, look, it just doesn't feel as stable anymore. When we dropped all the way down to one employee, I still talk to that one employee today too, by the way. I talked to the one that said things aren't stable. I talked to the one that all the way down to one employee, and he's referred some great people over to me. And he's actually high up at another agency right now. But when people leave you, they're ultimately firing you as a leader. They're firing because ultimately what they're looking for is they want to grow at a company. They want there to be, obviously there needs to be safety because they need to put food on the table for their loved ones. And I failed these people at the end of the day. And that was a very humbling lesson. And I would say my emotional state at the time, it was the emotional roller coaster where I wasn't sure if we'd be able to survive or even make the next payroll. And so there's a lot of pressure. I would say maybe a counter lesson to this would be, this is where a lot of my poker training from college really came into play here, because I didn't really let anything get me too far down. And I just knew that work needed to be done and I needed to just put one foot in front of the other every single day, just do that over and over and things would end up being okay. And so in 2015, we had dropped all the way down to one employee. So now the question is, well, how do we survive? Because if we're down to one employee, how do we manage all the clients, right? And so that actually leads me to the next point. Now, the rise of Single Grain really is from 2015 until, call it 2018 or so. And so, what ended up happening was how we started to turn the ship around was we got lucky, because my background is in SEO, right? So maybe I would say it's a combination of luck and skill. And luck is where preparation meets opportunity, right? And so we started ranking number one for the keyword digital marketing agency. And my background's in search engine optimization. And so for a 3-year period, we ranked number one for that keyword and we couldn't fulfill the work. And so what ended up happening was my now podcast co-host, Neil, who we've been doing a podcast called Marketing School together for the last 8 years or so. Neil said he was referring these leads over to an agency, and I just asked for an introduction to the agency, and we ended up taking like a 25 to 30% referral commission on these leads, and that worked out well for us. And what ended up happening was that gave us the cash flow that we needed to survive. And then it wasn't like I was trying to pocket the money. I quickly took those cash flows and started to hire people. And so what happened here was I got heavily involved with the company. And, for 2015, I would say we were more or less like an affiliate company where we're just sending the leads out and then we're getting paid on it. And in that case, I think that year we did like $600,000 or $700,000 in profit, which is pretty good, right? Just being like basically a one-man affiliate operation. And, then I thought to myself, well, we're getting all these leads. We'll probably make more money if we service them. So I'm going to try to, revive this agency, this thing that basically almost fell apart in the first year, right? And by the way, I would say the 700,000 is the most profitable at the time that the agency had ever gotten to, right? So that is an accomplishment in itself without any overhead. So those of you that are thinking, hey, can I have a one-man business? You absolutely can. Just for me, I wanted to really test myself and see how far I could go. And so I thought it made a lot of sense to have an office in downtown LA. At the time, I was living near LAX, and I would drive there probably once or twice a week. And we hired this guy Ramsey, who I still talk to, by the way. I still talk to a lot of these people, and I'm actually going to see him in Japan in a couple weeks. But point being here that my intuition, and I'm going to come back to this in a little bit. The intuition was that if we get people in the office, there's going to be a culture that builds and people are going to be bought in and they're going to feel like they're part of something that's bigger than themselves. And again, bear in mind, this is late 2015 or so. We had already started to do remote, right? We started out doing hybrid, I should say hybrid. So it would basically be I think 1 or 2 days in the office, and then the three days would be work from home. And that worked out really well. And, Ramsey was basically kind of like he just graduated from college, right? And he took a shot on us. And then we actually ended up hiring some amazing people using the affiliate cash flows. We hired an operations person. We hired a paid media person because we were getting a lot of paid media leads. Daniel, Philippe, and then we hired an executive assistant. And I think those, plus Ramsey had left, and then we brought in those 3 people. I would say those 3 key hires started to move the dominoes again. It started to really revive things. And so I tie everything back to people at the end of the day. I don't care if you have a product business. I don't care if you have a services business. It all comes down to people. And I really credit those 3 people at the end of the day, because we can have all the rankings in the world, but it would still be a one-man operation. That led to things compounding because people they like working with A players, and they like, talking to A players, and it's a pleasant thing, right? Things just flow when you're working with A players. And I think we got those right. And so that's another lesson in really just staying involved. And so I would say that from that point, from 2015 to 2018, the leads started picking up more. We started hiring more and more people, and then people would meet in the downtown LA office, and then we switched to a 3-2 working model where we were in the office Monday through Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday work from home. Everybody loved that. It was so innovative at the time, and I would say that I was the way we turned everything around was I was heavily involved. 2015 to 2018, heavily involved. I still had in the back of my mind that I really wanted to hire that CEO, so shiny knowledge syndrome again. But I would just say that going back to intuition, going to the gut again, a lot of these things that I learned, they didn't necessarily feel right, but I went ahead and implemented them anyway because other people do it. So I think one of the key lessons for you to all understand is that you watching this, you've developed this gut for a reason, and it's right much more often than it's not. It's because your gut has pattern recognition and it has a lot of experience, and from experience comes wisdom. And you have to trust it. I didn't trust it enough. I really love the idea of hiring a CEO and getting out of their way. And I really love the idea of let my people go surfing. But I do believe it's a pipe dream to believe that you can just have someone else run your business while you're sitting on a beach. You have to stay heavily involved. And I'll come back to more to this in a little bit. Now, I want to come back to, this is why you should stay till the end, right? There's the fall of single grain part 2 coming up, and then the rise of single grain part 2 coming up as well. I got to take a minute to tell you about the Agency Owners Association. This is a peer group for agency owners. Think YPO or EO, but for agency owners. And I just wanted to read you a couple of testimonials. So this first one comes from Carrie, and we asked her, what do you like most about the group? She said, having a group of people to discuss and bounce ideas. The leads are great too. Yes, we share leads in this group as well. This one from Alian, he says, the ability to really post whatever I want and need, and the group responds. Great experienced members, getting a lot of insights from conversations with other members, getting a lot of value from sessions from Eric, getting advice from others as well. And so if you want to grow your agency faster, and you want a peer group to do so, just go to marketingschool.io/agency. This is a group that both Neil and I created. And our hope here is to create a vibrant community of agency owners and do a lot more with it in the future. So again, marketingschool.io/agency, and we'll see you inside. The fall of single grain part 2, I would say is from 2019 to 2023 or so. Let's talk about the topic of hiring CEOs and hiring GMs, because I've hired 4 or 5. And you can make the argument that I didn't hire the right people, and that I would say that's absolutely fair, because I was really in love with the idea. But I ended up hiring people that came from large agencies and they had stellar reviews. But the challenge was that they actually hadn't been there, done that. And maybe this will go into the lesson section at the end, but ideally, you're looking for someone that's been in that role for a while. Ideally, they've been promoted if they're not, high C-level. And my whole thing was I was trading on potential, and you cannot trade on potential. Sure, you can, maybe with a less risky role. So, for example, I would say someone that is starting out in their career, maybe it's an intern role or maybe it's a mid-level role. You can take a higher risk there, and maybe 10 to 20% of the time on your talent, maybe you're taking more of a risk, but the more riskier it is and the more responsibilities they're taking, the more you have to de-risk it. The more you're probably looking for someone that's been there, done that, and you're looking for someone to tell you what to do. And I remember Steve Jobs saying this. He says at Apple, we hire people that are smarter than us, not to tell them what to do, but for them to tell us what to do. And I'm paraphrasing here. And so what I learned from that is not necessarily that I won't hire CEOs and GMs anymore. It's one that I would do a lot more due diligence and not have rose-colored glasses there, and look for someone that's been there, done that, and hardcore reference check, and take my time looking for that person. And there's some other times where we came close to hiring someone that was a CEO at another agency, but we found some red flags in that situation too, and we decided not to move forward on that person. So I would just say, multiple times where we hired the CEOs and GMs, I stepped out immediately. So I remember in 2019, we did this, and I stepped out for 6 months to focus on our software product. And I had this knot in my stomach where I just felt like something was off. So you can feel like something's off with your baby, right? It's strange. Because then 6 months into it, we had 2 employees from the team reach out, and they said, hey, we need to have dinner. We just need to talk about this, right? And then basically the dinner, they kind of gave me the lowdown and said, this is not going to work. Like, it's been a disaster. And on me, again, I trusted blindly, but I didn't verify. I onboarded this person for about a month or so, and I thought that she had it, and I was checking in with her every week, but the updates she was giving were haphazard, and I felt like she was kind of trying to keep me at arm's length. And so I would just say in that situation, I should have stepped in a lot sooner, because I knew something was off probably a month or 2 into it. And you got to trust that gut. And so I would say, that was one situation. But then if we fast forward to 2020, 2021 or so, we end up doing these 2 agency acquisitions. And with these 2 agency acquisitions, one of them came with a general manager. And this general manager, this person had worked at another agency for 10 plus years. And this was I'm in an organization called YPO. This was another YPO led agency. And so what I would just say in this situation was that this person, a few months into it, said that, she had a family problem. And we said, hey, we love you. We got you. Go take care of your family. We're going to put you on paid leave. And like clockwork, each following week, someone resigned. You would have someone that had stayed with me for 4 or 5 years, they would resign. And then the following week, someone else would resign, right? And it would just seem really odd. It was always on Monday, someone resigned, and it would never tell us where they were going. And maybe a month or 2 later, we got a call. By the way, in the middle, we lost a client, a cruise client that was paying us $2 million a year. And then we get a call from a lawyer from another agency, like a counsel for another agency. And they said, hey, we need to talk. And they're like, hey, do you know this person? We said, yes, we do. They're with us. We have them on paid lead right now. They're like, no, we hired this person, and this person pulled your employees over, and we just want to let you know. And they're trying to do the same thing to us now. This agency was probably just trying to cover their butts, and showing some goodwill here, saying, hey, like, we took your people, right? But they're doing it to us now. Hey, just an FYI, right? And so I find out later, I actually ended up talking to the people that went to the other agency, and said they all said basically they were lied to, and they're very sorry, and they felt embarrassed at the end of the day, and they felt like they were bamboozled. And there's no one else to blame in the situation but me at the end of the day for allowing it to happen. But I can only have so many pity parties in this video, right? But I would just say I knew. Even during the hiring process, I loved the idea of the GM. She sounded good. She spoke well about things, but I something felt off, right? So when it comes to hiring, you got to trust your gut at the end of the day, because especially when you're scaling up to the first 10 people or so, each person is 10% of the company, right? You got to make sure everyone's a superstar, and then everyone's lifting each other up, because that sets the tone for, maybe the first 100 people or so. And so what happened there was we not only did 2 acquisitions, but we had a GM that was kind of poisoning the well, and that happened. But that happened after the acquisitions. But we did 2 acquisitions at once, okay? Basically a couple months away from each other. And at the same time, we're working on a software product too. And that was doing about $600,000 a year in annual recurring revenue. But we're spending a lot on it. We're burning money on it, I should say. We're working on an education product at the same time. And there's a handful of other projects that I was working on. So my focus was split. And I just love the idea of having a GM come in. And so I'm like, okay, GM, you got it over here. You look after the agency. I'm going to take over these things over here, and then like divide and conquer, right? But when you have someone that's not aligned, that's kind of poisoning the well, then everything ends up crumbling, right? Because not only was this person pulling people, but this person was trying to convince other people to leave, and saying that, leadership didn't like them, that I hated them, or that I heard this phrase from the people that left afterwards. So all that to say is that, the lack of focus really crushed us. And you can see this is a mistake that I made again, because the first time was too many changes happening at once, moving offices. I was still working on too many things. There's like a quiz software that I was working on. I was distracted, right? And so, you can be distracted in business, but you can also be distracted in your personal life as well. So you want to make sure that you're as focused as possible, which is why I'm an advocate when I look at a lot of my friends that are married. Once you're married or you're in a committed relationship, you're just focused on that and you're not getting distracted in other areas. And so this is why a lot of people, and by the way, I read a lot of books when in my 20s, and people would just keep saying focus. It's all about focus. It's all about focus. And then you hear about Warren Buffett, you hear about other people out there. They're just saying, what led to my success? It's one word, it's focus. And I do think for me, and we'll come back to the lessons in a little bit, and we're getting there, but it does come down to focus at the end of the day. And one other thing I would say is that, on top of the 2 acquisitions, we also brought in a head recruiter, and this person I trusted this person, but I didn't verify. And so what ended up happening was at the end of the recruiting process, I would always be the one to kind of verify, but I would always feel bad that, oh my God, we've spent so much time on this person, we should just let him in. If the team's confident in this person, I'm confident as well. But at the end of the day, I'm not saying you need to do this forever. But when you look at Jeff Bezos, of Amazon, when you look at Elon, when you look at a lot of these people, when it comes to engineers, for example, for Elon meets, I think he meets every single one. DoorDash's first 1,000 employees or so, I believe that the CEO talked to every single one of them. And so it's really important that you drill down and you really stick by your gut at the end of the day, because every time I didn't trust my gut, it would go wrong. And sometimes I'll go with my gut, but this person would feel really good, but in the back of my mind, I knew something was off, and 100% of the time, those would never work out, right? So you get compounding problems there when you have, one company that you're trying to integrate in after an acquisition, another company you're trying to integrate. Those are 2 completely different families, and then you're recruiting other outside people in, and they're not really aligned with your culture and how you do things. Well, what ends up happening is you're getting attacked on 3 different fronts, right? And when you're not focused on the company, that's what happens. And I certainly wasn't focused on the company. So that's what led to the downfall of Single Grain Part 2. And that led to us almost dying, almost having to go bankrupt. And I will tell you that it was about 3 years of cleanup to get to like the Single Grain of today. Oh my God. I think of culture as the culture of the company as a 60-day moving average, meaning last 60 days, like how's it felt, right? I don't think it's an annual thing. When people ask me about culture, it's like, I just think about the last 60 days. If it's amazing, then I think we have amazing culture. But if you're one of the leaders of the company, it's on you to drive that all the time. You're the chief reminder officer. You're constantly referring back to your mission, vision, values. For us, it's to be the most innovative marketing company that drives customers. And we repeat that over and over and over again. And you're just being that annoying parent. It's no different. It's you're managing an organization. A family's a little organization. This is a people organization as well. And I would say that the final thing that led to the fall of Single Grain Part 2, where we almost died, was not enough due diligence on the acquisitions. And so I think hiring CEOs, hiring GMs is great. I think doing acquisitions is great, but I think you have to do them correctly. I think you have to spend more time doing due diligence on key hires. You have to spend a lot more time doing due diligence on the acquisitions. And we had a broker that was trying to push these deals through very quickly. And I remember talking to someone else that sold to the broker, and they're like, yeah, there's all this weird pressure. Like, why do we need to sell the company in 2 weeks? Why do we need to sell in 4 weeks? It was just this weird thing going on. And I would just say that, if you don't do enough due diligence on the acquisitions, you're trying to close a deal in a month or so, or like 2 months or so. If you don't really have a strong M&A team around you, you should be taking probably 5 to 6 months on it. You should be talking to key employees. You should be talking to key customers, a couple of them. You should be talking to other potential stakeholders as well. We didn't get to do that. Had we learned a lot about how these companies operated, we probably wouldn't have acquired them. There are a handful of other ones that we're looking at, but these, I would just say that I wish I looked at a lot more deals. I wish we spent more time on the ones that we went into an LOI for, a letter of intent for, and that would have been a lot better. And so I think it's also really important to understand what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. One of my weaknesses is I'm very low on detail oriented, like 6% out of 100. So due diligence isn't exactly my thing, right? This is where I should surround myself with very detail oriented people and people that have been there, done that, where they can call me on my BS, because I tend to want to move quickly on things. And even though I'm a highly practical person, according to that personality test, like 95% or something, you still need to spend a lot more time being deliberate on these. And I'm actually pretty low on deliberate as well. And so I think understanding your strengths and weaknesses over time, you'll get these things. And, all these lessons I'm telling you about right now, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I prefer not to have to make these mistakes. And some of these examples, I made the same mistake twice, right? So it's good for me even just reflecting on this video over here to talk about these things. All right, quick note. This is about my company. It's called Single Grain, and Single Grain is an ad agency where we're focused on driving innovation. And so I want to talk about a couple of new strategies. And if you need help with marketing, great. If not, here are a couple of new strategies that you should try out. One is programmatic CRO. So we are doing programmatic conversion rate optimization on our site. We're building products that will automatically optimize your site to increase conversion rates. We're also auto-optimizing, auto-updating from an SEO standpoint. And we're constantly thinking about what else we can do in terms of enriching the visitors that are hitting your website and also tailoring custom messages for them using AI. And so there's a handful of things that we're doing from a marketing standpoint, and our mission is just to drive more innovation. So if you want to learn more, just go to singlegrain.com, grain like rice. So singlegrain.com to learn more, and we'll see you inside. The story now is we're now talking about the rise of Single Grain Part 2. And this is 2023 onward, really. And I would just say that the key thing here for us, the fact that we're growing the fastest that we've ever grown, one, I tell my team this every single week. We need to have an unreasonably high talent bar. Not just a high talent bar, but an unreasonably high talent bar. And so that word unreasonably is very strong, because my thesis is that we can only afford to hire the top 5% of people over time, because the smartest people are going to know how to power themselves with these 10,000, 100,000, a million AI agents that are infinitely patient. They understand, they have the knowledge of the entire internet. They have all your data for your company. They know how you work. They know what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, and they'll just collaborate with you. You can be the strategist, right? And I just don't think there's any room. And maybe 5% is a little intense, but sometimes you got to get an intense message across, and so you just go for top 5%. But it doesn't change the fact that we need to have an unreasonably high talent bar, because I've seen how it's gone for us in the past where we cut corners when it comes to hiring. I've seen what happens when we cut corners when it comes to due diligence on acquisitions. I've seen what happens when I'm not involved at the end of the day, right? So, being very involved, being very focused, I would say those are important. And also the reason why we're growing the fastest we've ever grown is, yes, we've hired amazing people, but two, I'm a lot closer to the business now, meaning that I'm kind of playing free safety. If I see things that are big or broken or new or opportunities, I'm more so going to focus on like the big and the broken things, right? And occasionally we're adding in new things, but we're very focused. We plan 3 years out. So we have the next 12 quarters planned out. And because we believe it takes 3 years to get something really big done, because the years go by so quickly. Like this year just flew by already. And so, I kind of play free safety. I'll jump in where I need to jump in. I'll kind of sprinkle my magic and then I'll hop out. And so in any situation in life, things are going to atrophy over time. And so that means things are going to decay over time. And I look at this as you're spinning a bunch of plates within a business, right? You have ops, you have finance, you have client services, you have sales, you have marketing, all these plates. And then some of these plates start to wobble, right? And you got to go start spinning them again, And that's me playing free safety. You're kind of watching all the problems, right? Free safety in American football. And you start spinning the plates again, or maybe you're like, twirling a bunch of basketballs, right? And so that's why you also can't have too many balls up in the air, because what ends up happening is you start to lose focus and things start to fall apart. You start dropping balls everywhere, right? And so I would say the other thing is, so being very focused, being very involved, trying to limit the number of initiatives just to preserve our resources, playing free safety where I need to. Not saying I'm micromanaging, but the plan is to acquire again, right? And we're looking at a couple of acquisitions right now. The plan is to hire a CEO again, right? Someone that's been there, done that, but to be very involved with that CEO and talk to that CEO quite a bit, and not have me jump out of the business anymore. It's for me to stay locked in with this person, working in lockstep. And once we find that person, great. But I'm enjoying my slot in the CEO role right now. I think the way we're moving right now is impressive, and I'm very happy with the 60-day moving average. I think it's the best that it's ever been. And I would just say that I'm excited about the future as well. But I know that in order for us to win, I need to trust people, but I need to verify, right? Which means, yes, absolutely delegate, but verify. When you trust but don't verify, you're effectively abdicating at the end of the day. So before I kind of cap it off with lessons learned and takeaways for you, and hopefully you got a couple of takeaways, but let's talk about where we're planning to go long term. And so where I'm planning to go long term is to continue to acquire, continue to grow, and continue to work on this thing for 30 years. One lesson I will give you is that, if you do raise money, let's say you pull in money from private equity, just understand that you have stakeholders. I'm not saying it's wrong or it's right, but you have stakeholders. You have a board, right? And some people, they're down with that. Maybe some people want to take chips off the table. Just understand that the more stakeholders you have, the more you're susceptible to outside influences. The more susceptible you are to outside influences, that means they are going to change the trajectory of where you might want to go. And so let's say private equity invests in your business. Well, they might want to sell your business in 7 years or so. Just understand that that's their timeline. And if you're okay with that, then go ahead and do it and make use of their resources. But I would just say that people that I've spoken to, I remember speaking to a client this week. They do $100 million a year. He's been working on the same business for 30 years, and he's just been working on that one business. And a friend of mine told me that he met a billionaire heiress, and she admitted she hadn't built anything, but her advice was, she just said, look, everywhere around me, I have my uncles, my father, my grandfather, my brothers, they built multi-billion-dollar companies. And what I've learned from that is that they all focused on one business and they did it for 30 plus years. And that's the trajectory, or that's the path that I want to walk on. And it's not a 10-year journey for me. It has been 10 years, I would say. But it's more, we're talking 30 years out. And I just don't see need. For me, I really enjoy playing the game, and I love the game that I'm playing right now. And it's very dynamic, and the world's changing so much, and I love it. Right, that the fact that business is it's so based on merit, and the fact that most of the big companies since 1995 are no longer around. I think there's a Fortune 500, only like 30% are around still in today's day and age. It fires me up. That's what I would say. So I'm very intrinsically motivated. I think you have to understand what you're motivated by. So for me, the plan is, how do we build this to a multi-9-figure thing? How do we build it to maybe even 10 figures a year, right, in revenue? And so, how do we expand globally? Like, those are things I'm all interested in. It's like, well, why are you interested in that? It's like, well, because it's fun, and I just love playing the game. And I will say that's a lesson for you as well. A lot of entrepreneurs I know that are doing very well, that have sold their business for hundreds of millions, they're still playing the game. Because why? Because they love playing the game, right? So the final thing I'll give to you here is the lessons learned. I'm going to summarize some of the main lessons here from the rise, the fall, the rise again. And so really, it's really the fall, the rise, the fall, the rise again. That's what it really is. And I would say the first thing for you to keep in mind is focused involvement. And so that's the phrase I keep telling myself all the time is, not only do I need to stay focused, but I need to be involved. And again, not necessarily to micromanage people, but you got to be keeping your eye on everything, right? Like, you got to be watching all the plates. And so even for me, a guy that, isn't particularly detail oriented, I have to be detail oriented where it's necessary. Otherwise, things are going to fall apart. And I'll say again, you got to trust, but you got to verify. If you don't verify, other people are going to do things the way that you don't want to do. You have to serve as bumpers, right? You think about bowling. Like, when you put bumpers there, like you're kind of keeping people with it, like not falling into the gutter, right? You got to serve as bumpers. And when you remove yourself, the bumpers are gone. A lot more people start falling into the gutters, right? So, and earlier I just talked about how it takes 30 plus years to build something generational. If you hit lightning in a bottle, great. Go sell it for multi-billion dollars. Congratulations to you. And I would just say that if you're a distractible person, like I certainly love trying a lot of different things, and I see people doing this a lot. I will tell you that anybody that says they have 3, 4, 5, 6 different businesses, in aggregate, their business is not that big. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's what works for them. But I just found that I feel like that's like when I'm in that situation, it feels like the train tracks, or the train's kind of falling off the rails, right? And I feel a lot more in control now that I'm focused on single grain. And so you can do multiple projects. Just make sure you keep it within the primary mission. So again, our mission is to be the most innovative marketing company that drives customers. So we tried to sit within that. And we also understand that there's the theory of constraints, right? We can't try to do too many things at once. So we got to stay very focused, which is why we plan 3 years out. And just to reinforce here that you got to trust your gut, because your gut has been developed for a reason. Anytime I haven't trusted my gut, I would say 99% of the time, my gut's correct. Probably is the same thing for you. And I do want to re-emphasize shiny object syndrome versus shiny knowledge syndrome. Arguably, shiny knowledge syndrome is more dangerous than shiny object syndrome, because you can act on knowledge very quickly. But shiny object syndrome is maybe you're trying to build a new business. That's going to take a lot more upfront effort. But shiny knowledge syndrome, you can start to take your team in all these different directions, which is certainly what I've done. You just got to be very careful of that. Those of you that love to learn, and I certainly do too, just be very, very careful of that. And delegation versus abdication. And so you can delegate, but as long as you're trusting but verifying, you're good. If you're trusting but not verifying, you're abdicating. And each time I've abdicated in this entire story, this arc of Single Brain, things have fallen apart completely and very quickly. And I felt when they were falling apart. So if you feel in your gut that things are falling apart, you better do something quickly, because I guarantee you some of the plates that you're spinning have maybe fallen, and you need to come back in there and repair. Because you, as one of the founders of the company, nobody's more incentivized than you to care. Even if you give a CEO some equity in the company, they will never care as much as you will, right? And you just have to be accepting of that. And so those are the lessons. And the final thing I want to leave you with here is I've been in business for over 16 years now. And let me tell you, the problems never stop coming. The problems are always coming. So they never stop coming, just to rephrase there. But I've learned in business on how to navigate them. And if you want to watch the full breakdown of this, I have a video over here somewhere about 16 years of business advice in 49 minutes or so. So this would have saved me decades and millions of dollars. And I trust it can do the same thing for you. I think probably even 9 figures for me. So take it for what it is. Go click somewhere over here, and we'll see you in that video.